My name is Maya Thompson, and I am 28 years old. After my billionaire grandma died, I inherited $15 billion, and my dad demanded it. Then I refused. 2 weeks ago, I lost the only person who never abandoned me. Now I am sitting in her mansion staring at the rose garden she taught me to tend. I thought losing her would be the greatest pain of my life. I was wrong. The greatest pain was discovering that some people would trample on the memory of the dead just to grab money. Before I share this story, let me know where you are watching from today. Drop your location in the comments, hit that like button, and subscribe if you have not already. This journey is long, and there are things I have never told anyone until now. To understand why I refused my own father $15 billion, you need to know where it all began. It started on a rainy night 25 years ago, when I was only 3 years old. I do not remember much about that night, but I remember enough. The sound of rain hitting the windows, my mother crying behind her bedroom door. I stood in the hallway clutching my teddy bear, too young to understand what was happening, but old enough to feel that something was terribly wrong. The next morning, my father's clothes were gone from the closet. His shoes were missing from the rack by the door. His toothbrush had vanished from the bathroom. My mother, Susan, sat at the kitchen table with red eyes and told me that Daddy had gone on a long business trip and would not be coming back. I accepted that explanation the way children accept things they cannot comprehend. I did not ask questions. I simply waited for him to return. He never did. Years later, I learned the truth. My father, Derek Thompson, had left us for another woman. Her name was Christina Lawson, a former model he met during a work conference in Miami. He did not leave a note. He did not leave money for child support. He simply packed his bags in the middle of the night and disappeared from our lives as if my mother and I had never existed. He was 30 years old. I was 3. My mother was 27 with no savings and a part-time job that barely covered rent. Those early years were difficult in ways I only fully understood as an adult. My mother worked 2 jobs to keep us afloat. During the day, she was an accounting clerk at a small firm downtown. At night, she waited tables at a restaurant that stayed open until midnight. I learned to make my own sandwiches by the time I was 5. I learned to put myself to bed by the time I was 6. I learned that some fathers simply do not come home, and some mothers have to become everything. We lived in a small apartment with thin walls and radiators that clanked through the winter. My bedroom was barely bigger than a closet, but my mother had painted the walls yellow to make it feel sunny. She hung pictures I drew in kindergarten and told me I was the most talented artist she had ever seen. Looking back, I realized she was trying to fill the space my father left behind with color and love and affirmation. She was trying to be both parents at once. My grandmother Eleanor reached out several times during those years. She was my father's mother, a woman I had only met once, at a family gathering I was too young to remember. She called my mother and offered financial help. She offered to pay for a bigger apartment for my school supplies, for anything we needed. My mother refused every time. She was proud and hurt and did not want anything from the Thompson family after what Derek had done. But Eleanor did not give up. Every year on my birthday, a package would arrive at our door with no return address. Inside would be a beautiful dress or a set of books or a piece of jewelry clearly too expensive for a child. My mother knew it was from Eleanor, but she let me keep the gifts. I think deep down she understood that Eleanor was not Derek. She was just a grandmother, trying to love her granddaughter from a distance. When I was 12 years old, my mother started getting headaches that would not go away. She blamed stress. She blamed long hours. She blamed the flickering fluorescent lights at the restaurant. By the time she finally went to the doctor, the cancer had already spread. Stage 4, inoperable. They gave her 6 months. She lasted 4. I remember sitting beside her hospital bed, holding her hand as the machines beeped their steady rhythm. Her skin was paper thin, her eyes sunken, but she still smiled when she looked at me. She told me she was sorry. She told me she wished she could watch me grow up. She told me that before she called the nurse, she needed to make one phone call. I stepped outside while she talked. I did not know who she was calling. I found out 3 days later at her funeral when a silver-haired woman in an elegant black coat approached me and said she was my grandmother. Eleanor Thompson was 70 years old when she became my guardian. She was tall and dignified with sharp eyes that seemed to see everything, and a voice that commanded attention without ever being raised. She had built her fortune from nothing, starting with a single rental property in Seattle and expanding into a real estate and technology empire worth billions. She was featured in magazines, invited to speak at conferences, and consulted by politicians. But when she looked at me standing alone at my mother's grave in a dress 2 sizes too big, she did not see a project or an obligation. She saw a child who needed love. She knelt down to my level and took my hands in hers. They were warm despite the cold November air. She said that she was sorry about my mother. She said that my mother had been a good woman who deserved better than what life gave her. And then she said the words that changed everything. She said she would take care of me now, and she would never abandon me the way her son had. She kept that promise for 16 years. Moving into Eleanor's mansion felt like stepping into another world. The house sat on 12 acres of manicured grounds outside Portland, with gardens that bloomed in every season, and a pond where swans glided across the water like something from a fairy tale. My bedroom was bigger than our entire apartment had been. The closet was filled with clothes in my size, and the bookshelves held every title I had ever mentioned wanting to read. But Eleanor made it clear from the first day that she was not going to spoil me with material things without teaching me their meaning. She believed in hard work. She believed in education. She believed that wealth was a tool, not a destination. Every weekend she would sit with me in her library, a room with floor-to-ceiling windows and thousands of books, and share stories from her life. She told me about growing up poor, the daughter of a carpenter who could barely make ends meet. She told me about dropping out of college to care for her sick mother, then teaching herself business by reading every book she could find. She told me about her first investment, a rundown duplex she bought with money she saved working as a waitress, and how she renovated it with her own hands and rented it out for twice what she paid in mortgage. She told me about failures, too. The deal that fell through and almost bankrupted her. The partner who embezzled funds and disappeared to Mexico. The year she lost everything and had to start over from scratch at 45. But she always got back up. She always found another way. She said that life would knock me down many times, and the only thing that mattered was whether I stood up again. I absorbed every lesson like a sponge absorbs water. I understood even at 12 that my grandmother was not just wealthy, she was wise. And she was sharing that wisdom with me because she loved me, not because she wanted something in return. When I was 16, she told me the full truth about my father. We were sitting in the rose garden, the same garden where I sit now, when she began to speak about Derek in a way she never had before. Her voice was heavy with a sadness I had not heard from her. She said that Derek had been a difficult child, spoiled perhaps because he was her only son, and she had given him too much without demanding enough in return. He grew into a man who expected the world to hand him things. When it did not, he became resentful. When he met Christina at that conference, he saw an escape from the life he felt entitled to something better than. Your mother loved him, Eleanor said, but he was not capable of loving anyone more than himself. After Derek left us, he went to Eleanor and demanded money to start his new life with Christina. Eleanor refused at first. She was disgusted by what he had done to my mother and me. But Derek threatened to take her to court and claim his inheritance early, dragging the family name through public scandal. So Eleanor made a deal with him. She would provide him with a monthly allowance enough to live comfortably, but only if he agreed to stay away from me and my mother. He signed the agreement the same day. I felt something cold settle in my chest as she told me this. My father had literally sold his relationship with me for a monthly check. He had been paid to abandon me. Eleanor must have seen the devastation on my face because she took my hand and spoke firmly. She said that Derek's choices said nothing about my worth. She said that some people were broken in ways that could not be fixed, and the best thing to do was to stop waiting for them to change. She said I deserved a father who would have walked through fire for me, and since I did not have one, she would do her best to fill that role herself. 2 years later, when I was 18, I saw Derek for the first and only time before the funeral. I was at a restaurant in downtown Portland with some friends from school celebrating someone's birthday. I had stepped away to use the restroom when I spotted him at a corner table. He was older than I remembered from photographs, his hair thinner and his face more lined, but I knew immediately who he was. He sat across from a blonde woman dripping in jewelry, and beside them were 2 young men who looked close to my age. His new family, his replacement children. I stood frozen in the hallway, unable to move. He glanced up from his menu, and our eyes met. I saw recognition flash across his face. He knew who I was. For one heartbeat, I thought he might stand up, might come to me, might finally say something after 15 years of silence. Instead, he looked back down at his menu, as if he had seen nothing more interesting than a stranger. I heard the blonde woman ask who he was looking at. I heard him say it was just someone who resembled an old acquaintance. I walked out of the restaurant without returning to my friends. I took a cab back to Eleanor's house and cried in my room until I had no tears left. When Eleanor came to check on me, I told her everything. She held me for a long time without speaking. Then she said something I have never forgotten. She said that one day Derek would face the consequences of his cruelty. She said the universe had a way of balancing the scales. She said I should not waste my youth waiting for justice that might never come, but I should also never forget what he did. I decided that night to build my own life without any connection to Derek Thompson. I applied for scholarships and got into a good university based on my own merits, not my grandmother's money. I chose to study education because I wanted to help children the way teachers had helped me during my hardest years. After graduating, I became an elementary school teacher. At a public school in Portland, I rented a small apartment near the school, decorated it with plants and secondhand furniture, and built a life that was entirely my own. Eleanor was proud of me. She told me often that I was the only Thompson who understood what really mattered. She said her fortune meant nothing if it was not used for good, and she was glad I had the character to use it wisely when the time came. I did not fully understand what she meant until the day she died. Eleanor's health began to decline 3 months before she passed. The doctors diagnosed congestive heart failure, a condition that had been silently weakening her heart for years. They recommended aggressive treatment, hospital stays, medications with harsh side effects. Eleanor refused. She said she had lived 84 full years, built an empire, loved and lost and learned. She was ready to go on her own terms. I took a leave of absence from teaching to stay with her. Those final months were painful but precious. We spent hours talking about everything and nothing. She told me more stories about her life, details she had never shared before. She showed me old photographs and letters from people she had loved. She walked me through the rose garden one last time, pointing out each variety and remembering when she had planted it. She said the garden was like life. You planted seeds without knowing exactly what would grow, but if you tended them with care, beauty would emerge. 1 week before she died, she called her lawyer, Helen Garcia, and her longtime butler, Marcus Webb, to the house for a private meeting. She asked me to leave the room. I waited in the hallway for over 2 hours, my stomach tight with anxiety. When the door finally opened, Eleanor looked exhausted, but peaceful. She told me not to worry, that everything was in order. She said there were things I would understand soon, and I should trust that she had my best interests at heart. She passed away on a Tuesday morning in late October. I was holding her hand when she took her last breath. Her eyes were closed, her face relaxed, and for a moment, I thought she might just be sleeping. Then the monitors went silent, and I knew she was gone. The woman who had saved me, raised me, loved me unconditionally for 16 years was no longer in this world. The funeral was held 5 days later at the estate. Hundreds of people came to pay their respects. Business leaders, politicians, celebrities, charity directors, and ordinary people whose lives Eleanor had touched through her philanthropy. I stood near the casket in a simple black dress, accepting condolences from strangers who told me how much my grandmother had meant to them. I felt numb, hollowed out by grief, barely able to process the enormity of the loss. Then I saw him. Derek walked through the front door, flanked by Christina and their 2 sons, Brandon and Tyler. They were dressed impeccably, as if they had stepped off the pages of a fashion magazine. Christina's diamonds caught the light. The boys slouched with the bored arrogance of young men who had never worked for anything in their lives. And Derek, my father, walked toward me with his arms outstretched and tears glistening in his eyes. He embraced me before I could step back. He called me his baby girl, his precious daughter, his sweetheart. He said he was so sorry for my loss, that Eleanor had been a wonderful woman, that he wished he could have been there for me during this difficult time. His words were honey, but I felt the venom beneath them. I stood rigid in his arms, my hands at my sides, refusing to return the hug. He pulled back with a wounded expression, as if my coldness had hurt him deeply. Christina stepped forward and offered her own condolences, her smile never reaching her eyes. Brandon and Tyler nodded in my direction without speaking, their gazes already wandering around the room, appraising the artwork and antiques. I excused myself and retreated to the rose garden where I stayed until the service ended. 3 days after the funeral, Helen Garcia gathered everyone named in Eleanor's will for the official reading. The meeting took place in the mansion's formal dining room, with its mahogany table and crystal chandelier. I sat at one end with my best friend Lily beside me for moral support. Derek sat at the other end with Christina Brandon Tyler and their own attorney, a slick man in a pinstripe suit who kept checking his phone. Helen began by reading the smaller bequests. Eleanor had left generous sums to the Thompson Foundation, her charitable organization that supported single mothers and orphan children. She had set aside money for hospitals, schools, and environmental causes. She had provided for Marcus and several other loyal employees who had served her for decades. Each recipient was named with care, each amount chosen with intention. Then Helen reached the main section of the will. She read slowly and clearly, making sure every word was understood. Eleanor Grace Thompson, being of sound mind and body, did hereby bequeath the entirety of her remaining estate, including all properties, investments, business holdings, and liquid assets, totaling approximately $15 billion to her granddaughter Maya Susan Thompson. The room went silent. Derek stared at Helen as if she had spoken in a foreign language. His face cycled through confusion, disbelief, and finally rage. Christina's mouth fell open. Brandon and Tyler exchanged bewildered looks. Derek stood up so abruptly that his chair scraped against the floor. He shouted that this was impossible, that he was Eleanor's son, her only child, her blood. He demanded to see the original document. His attorney began firing questions about witnesses and notarization and mental competency evaluations. Helen remained calm. She explained that the will had been prepared according to all legal requirements, witnessed by 2 attorneys and a notary, and filed with the probate court months before Eleanor's death. She also noted that Eleanor had recorded a video statement explaining her decision, which the court could review if the will was contested. She played the video. Eleanor appeared on the screen sitting in her library with afternoon light streaming through the windows. She looked directly into the camera and spoke with the clarity and authority that had defined her entire life. She said she was recording this message to explain why she had chosen to leave her fortune to Maya rather than Derek. She said that Derek had been given every advantage in life and had squandered them all. He had abandoned his wife and child for selfish reasons. He had accepted money to stay away from his own daughter. He had never worked an honest day in his life, living instead off the allowance she provided out of guilt and maternal obligation. She said she loved her son, but love did not require her to reward his failures. She said Maya was the only person in her family who understood that wealth was a responsibility, not an entitlement. She trusted Maya to honor her legacy. The video ended. Derek was shaking with fury. Christina was hissing something in his ear. Their attorney was already talking about grounds for appeal. I sat in my chair, feeling the weight of $15 billion settle onto my shoulders like a physical burden. The counterattack began within a week. Derek and Christina hired a public relations firm to plant stories in tabloid newspapers and entertainment websites. The headlines were vicious. Greedy granddaughter steals fortune from grieving son. Elderly billionaire manipulated by live-in relative. Secret plot exposed as family torn apart by inheritance battle. The articles portrayed me as a calculating schemer who had isolated Eleanor from her son and manipulated her into changing the will. They painted Derek as a heartbroken parent who had been unfairly cut off from his dying mother. None of it was true, but truth does not always matter in the court of public opinion. My phone rang constantly, with calls from reporters seeking comment. Photographers camped outside my apartment building. Parents at my school started to whisper when I walked past. One mother requested that her child be transferred to another classroom because she did not want her son taught by someone involved in such an ugly dispute. I stopped leaving my apartment except when absolutely necessary. I stopped answering calls from numbers I did not recognize. I felt hunted, exposed, stripped of the private life I had worked so hard to build. One evening, I came home to find Derek waiting outside my door. He was alone this time, without Christina's sharp presence beside him. He looked smaller, somehow diminished, his expensive suit wrinkled as if he had been wearing it for days. When he saw me, his face crumpled into an expression of remorse. He started talking before I could even get my keys out. He said he was sorry. He said he knew he had made terrible mistakes. He said he had been young and foolish when he left, that he had not understood the value of family until it was too late. He said losing his mother had broken something inside him, and all he wanted now was a chance to make things right. He said he did not need much, just enough to live with dignity in his remaining years. He said he knew he did not deserve it, but he was begging me father to daughter for mercy. I stood in the hallway listening to him speak, watching the tears roll down his cheeks, and I wanted to believe him. Despite everything, some small part of me still longed for a father. Some wounded child inside me wondered if this could finally be the reconciliation I had dreamed about for 25 years. I told him I needed time to think. His face lit up with hope. He hugged me again, and this time I let him. He thanked me over and over, promising that things would be different now. He gave me his phone number and asked me to call when I was ready to talk. After he left, I called Lily and told her what had happened. She was skeptical. She reminded me of everything I had told her about Derek over the years, but she also said she would support whatever decision I made. 2 days later, Marcus called me with news that shattered my fragile hope. He said he needed to tell me something important, something he had been holding on to since the funeral. He said that on the day Eleanor was buried while the reception was happening inside the house, he had stepped onto the back terrace for fresh air. Derek and Christina were standing near the garden speaking quietly, unaware that Marcus was within earshot. He heard everything they said. Marcus had recorded the conversation on his phone. He sent me the audio file, and I listened to it alone in my apartment with the curtains drawn. Derek's voice was different on the recording. Lighter, crueler, stripped of the grief he had performed for me. He was laughing with Christina about how easy it would be to get the money. He called me a naive little fool who had never lived in the real world. He said he would play the repentant father until I gave in, then cut me off completely once the assets were transferred. Christina's voice joined in, cackling about the yacht they would buy and the trips they would take. She said it served the old woman right for leaving everything to a nobody schoolteacher. I listened to the recording 3 times to make sure I had heard correctly. Then I sat in the dark and let the truth wash over me. My father had not changed. He had never changed. He was not capable of change. The tears he had shed in my hallway were as fake as his promises. He saw me as nothing more than an obstacle between him and money. I deleted his phone number from my contacts. The lawsuit arrived a week later. Derek filed papers claiming that Eleanor had lacked the mental capacity to make sound decisions in her final months, and that I had exercised undue influence over her. He demanded that the will be invalidated and her estate distributed according to intestacy laws, which would make him the primary heir as her only child. The court battle consumed the next several months. I had to testify about my relationship with Eleanor. I had to provide documentation of her mental state. I had to sit in a courtroom while Derek's attorney painted me as a manipulative gold digger who had preyed on a confused old woman. The stress was unbearable. I lost weight. I could not sleep. I started to wonder if any amount of money was worth this torment. The first hearing was one of the worst days of my life. I arrived at the courthouse in the same simple dress I had worn, to the will reading the one Eleanor had given me for my 21st birthday. Derek and his entourage swept in like celebrities attending a premiere, followed by cameras and reporters shouting questions. Christina posed on the courthouse steps while their attorney made a statement about justice and family rights. Inside, the atmosphere was suffocating. Derek's legal team presented their case with theatrical confidence. They called witnesses who testified that Eleanor had seemed confused in her final years, forgetting names and repeating stories. Most of these witnesses were former employees who had been fired for various infractions, bitter people looking for revenge or payment. One woman claimed Eleanor had once accused her of stealing jewelry that was later found in a drawer, proof of the old woman's failing mind. Helen Garcia methodically dismantled each claim. She presented Eleanor's medical records showing no diagnosis of dementia or cognitive decline. She brought in Eleanor's personal physician, who testified that his patient had been sharp and lucid until the very end. She submitted business documents Eleanor had signed in her final month's complex contracts that required sophisticated understanding to navigate. Then Helen played Eleanor's video statement again, this time on a large screen, so the entire courtroom could see. My grandmother's voice filled the room, clear and unwavering, as she explained exactly why she had made the choices she made. When the video ended, even the judge looked moved. But the worst moment came when Brandon and Tyler took the stand. They testified that I had called them multiple times in the months before Eleanor's death, threatening to destroy them if they came near the inheritance. They said I had used vulgar language and made violent threats. They described conversations that had never happened, phone calls I had never made, words I had never spoken. I sat at the plaintiff's table and felt something crack inside me. These two young men, my half-brothers by blood, if nothing else, were lying under oath to steal money from me. They did not even know me. We had never exchanged a single word before this trial, and yet they spoke about me with such conviction that someone who did not know the truth might actually believe them. I looked at Derek. He would not meet my eyes. Christina smiled at me from across the aisle, a small, triumphant smile that made my stomach turn. The media coverage after that first hearing was devastating. Reporters who had previously seemed sympathetic now questioned my character. Opinion pieces appeared online accusing me of being a cold, calculating woman who did not deserve such wealth. I received death threats through social media. Someone left a dead animal on my doorstep. Lily moved into my apartment for a few weeks because I was afraid to be alone. She held me while I cried and told me that the truth would come out eventually. She said that people who lie under oath always get caught. She said I just needed to hold on a little longer. But there were nights when I was not sure I could. Nights when I sat alone in the dark and seriously considered just giving Derek what he wanted. He could have the money. He could have everything. I just wanted my life back. I just wanted to teach my students and tend my garden and remember my grandmother in peace. One night, I found myself holding my phone, Derek's number typed in from the court documents. My thumb hovered over the call button. I was ready to surrender. Then I remembered what Eleanor had told me years ago, sitting in this same rose garden. She said, never let the bully win. She said, if you give in once, they will demand more forever. She said strength was not about fighting. It was about refusing to be conquered. I put down the phone. I decided to fight. Helen Garcia had been holding back her strongest evidence, waiting for the right moment to deploy it. That moment came at the second major hearing 6 months after the first. Derek's attorneys had grown confident, perhaps too confident. They filed motions demanding immediate access to Eleanor's assets, arguing that the case was essentially decided in their favor. The judge scheduled a hearing to review the motion. Helen walked into that courtroom with a thick folder and a calm expression that I had learned to recognize as dangerous. She began by calling Marcus Webb to the stand. Marcus, who had served Eleanor for 30 years, who had watched me grow from a grieving child into a woman who loved my grandmother almost as much as I did. He testified about Eleanor's character, her intelligence, her careful approach to every decision she made. Then Helen asked Marcus if he had any other evidence related to the case. Marcus said yes. He produced a flash drive containing the audio recording from the funeral, the conversation between Derek and Christina about manipulating me. Derek's attorney objected immediately. He argued that the recording was obtained without consent, that it was inadmissible, that it violated privacy laws. The judge reviewed the relevant statutes and ruled that in Oregon, one-party consent was sufficient for recording. And since the conversation took place in a semi-public setting at an event Marcus was attending, the evidence was admissible. Helen played the recording for the courtroom. Derek's voice echoed through the speakers, casual and mocking. A naive little fool, never lived in the real world. Cut her off completely once we get the money. The yacht they would buy, the trips they would take. I watched the judge's face as she listened. I watched the jury. Technically, this was a civil case, but 12 citizens had been impaneled to advise on questions of fact. I watched the reporters in the gallery scribbling furiously in their notebooks. Derek sat motionless, his face drained of color. Christina gripped his arm so tightly, her knuckles went white. Their attorney looked like a man watching his house burn down. Helen was not finished. She called Eleanor's personal assistant to testify about the extensive documentation Eleanor had kept throughout her life. She presented a file containing 20 years of records, every wire transfer to Derek, every threatening letter he had sent demanding more money, every promise he had broken. She showed the contract Derek had signed agreeing to stay away from me in exchange for his allowance, complete with his notarized signature. She presented Eleanor's personal journals, leather-bound notebooks filled with her grandmother's elegant handwriting. In them, Eleanor had recorded her feelings about Derek, her disappointment in the man he had become, her determination to protect me from his influence. The entries were heartbreaking. A mother who loved her son but could not blind herself to his failures. A woman who hoped until the very end that he might change, even as she prepared for the probability that he would not. Finally, Helen presented testimony from Brandon and Tyler themselves. Under cross-examination, stripped of their rehearsed scripts, the two young men crumbled. Helen asked detailed questions about the supposed phone calls I had made, What number had I called from what time of day? What exactly had I said? The brothers contradicted each other repeatedly. Tyler said the calls happened in the evening. Brandon said they happened in the morning. Tyler said I had used specific threats. Brandon could not remember any specific words. Helen produced my phone records obtained through legal discovery. There were no calls to any number associated with Brandon or Tyler. Not one. The boys had lied about everything. Tyler broke first. His voice cracked as he admitted that his parents had told him what to say. He said he was sorry. He said he never wanted to hurt anyone. He said he just wanted his dad to be proud of him. Brandon followed soon after his arrogance dissolved into tears. Both brothers apologized to me directly, turning in their seats to face me, while the judge admonished Derek and Christina for suborning perjury. The judge dismissed Derek's lawsuit with prejudice, meaning he could never file it again. She also referred the matter to the district attorney's office for investigation of perjury and fraud. She ordered Derek to pay all of my legal fees, plus additional damages for the emotional distress his campaign had caused. After the ruling was announced, Derek pushed through the crowd to reach me in the hallway. His face was desperate, wild, all pretense of dignity abandoned. He grabbed my arm and begged me to help him. He said Christina would leave him if he lost the money. He said he would have nothing, no home, no future, nothing. He said he knew he had made mistakes, but did I really want to see my own father destroyed? I stopped walking and turned to face him. I looked into his eyes, the same brown eyes I saw in the mirror every morning, and I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, no longing, just emptiness where a daughter's love should have been. I said that 25 years ago, he had the chance to be my father. He chose to leave. Today, I had the chance to save him. I chose to refuse. I pulled my arm free and walked away. He called after me, his voice echoing through the marble corridor. He screamed that I was heartless, that I was just like his mother, that I would regret this. I kept walking. I did not look back. 1 month later, I held a press conference to announce my plans for the inheritance. I stood behind a podium in the Thompson Foundation headquarters, surrounded by reporters and cameras, and spoke from the heart. I said that I had never asked for this fortune. I had been happy as a teacher, living simply, making a difference, one student at a time. But my grandmother had trusted me with her legacy, and I intended to honor that trust. I announced that $10 billion would go to expanding the Thompson Foundation, with a focus on education for underprivileged children, support for single-parent families, and scholarships for first-generation college students. I said that my grandmother had started her life with nothing and built an empire through hard work and determination. I wanted to give others the same chance. I said I would retain $5 billion to manage Thompson Holdings and ensure the jobs of the thousands of employees who depended on the company. I said I would learn what I needed to learn and hire the best people to help me make wise decisions. And I said I would continue teaching because that was my calling, because those children mattered to me, because money could not replace the joy of watching a struggling student finally understand a concept they had been fighting with for weeks. The reporters asked about Derek. I said I wished him no ill will. I said he was responsible for his own choices and their consequence. I said I hoped he would find peace, but I would not be part of his life going forward. The coverage after the press conference was overwhelmingly positive. The same outlets that had vilified me now praised my generosity and wisdom. I became the subject of admiring profiles and inspirational articles. People stopped me on the street to thank me for my charitable work. The students at my school made me a card that said Best Teacher and Best Person. I appreciated the support, but I knew that public opinion was fickle. The people who loved me today might turn on me tomorrow. The only opinions that truly mattered were those of the people I loved and the person I saw in the mirror. The months after the trial were a time of healing. I started seeing a therapist, a kind woman named Dr. Patterson, who helped me process the complicated grief of losing Eleanor and the fresh wound of Derek's betrayal. We talked about what it meant to be abandoned twice by the same person. We talked about the difference between forgiving someone and allowing them back into your life. We talked about building an identity that was not defined by the people who had hurt me. Slowly, I began to feel like myself again. Lily remained my closest friend and most trusted confidant. She had stood by me through everything, never wavering, never judging. When I offered to pay off her student loans as a thank you, she laughed and said she would rather I buy her dinner once a week for the rest of our lives. So that is what I did. Every Wednesday, we try a new restaurant, and talk about everything except money and lawsuits and family drama. Daniel, my colleague from school, became something more than a friend. Our relationship developed slowly, carefully built on shared values and genuine affection, rather than the wealth that now attached to my name. He had known me before the inheritance, had liked me when I was just Maya, the fourth-grade teacher, with the tiny apartment and the second-hand furniture. When I asked him once if my money made him uncomfortable, he said the only thing that made him uncomfortable was when I tried to pay for everything. We compromised. He pays for coffee. I pay for vacations. I spent weekends at Eleanor's estate, which I suppose was my estate now, though I still could not think of it that way. I worked in the rose garden, pruning and planting, and tending the flowers the way she had taught me. Marcus stayed on as caretaker, and we often sat together on the terrace in the evenings, sharing memories of the remarkable woman we had both loved. The Thompson Foundation grew beyond anything Eleanor had imagined. Within the first year of my leadership, we built 12 schools in underserved communities across America. We funded 5,000 scholarships for students who would be the first in their families to attend college. We established support centers for single mothers in 10 major cities, providing job training, childcare, and counseling services. I visited one of the schools on its opening day. Children ran through hallways that smelled of fresh paint, their laughter echoing off walls covered with bright murals. A little girl tugged on my sleeve and asked if I was the lady who built the school. I said yes. She hugged my legs and said, "Thank you." I thought about Eleanor and what she would have said. I thought she would have been proud. Marcus told me often that Eleanor was watching over me. He said she had known somehow that Derek would try to take everything. She had prepared for it, leaving behind the evidence and documentation that ultimately won the case. She had trusted me to stand firm, and I had. He said that was her final lesson, the one she could not teach me while she was alive. Sometimes you have to walk through fire to discover how strong you really are. I thought about Derek sometimes. After the trial, Christina filed for divorce just as he had predicted. She took whatever assets remained in their joint accounts and moved to Florida with a new boyfriend. Brandon and Tyler, facing potential perjury charges, agreed to community service and probation in exchange for their testimony against their parents' fraud scheme. Last I heard, they were both working entry-level jobs and trying to rebuild their lives honestly. Derek lost everything: the mansion in Lake Oswego, the luxury cars, the country club membership, the lifestyle he had maintained for 25 years on Eleanor's reluctant generosity. He moved to a small town in Nevada, into a rental apartment barely bigger than the one my mother and I had shared when I was a child. Someone sent me a photograph, once a grainy image of a gray-haired man pushing a shopping cart through a discount grocery store. I looked at it for a long time, trying to feel something: satisfaction, vindication, pity. But all I felt was a distant sadness for a life wasted on selfishness. I do not hate my father. Hatred takes energy, and I would rather spend that energy on people who deserve it. I do not forgive him either, not in the sense of pretending what he did was acceptable. I have simply let him go. He made his choices. He lives with their consequences. That is not my burden to carry. What I have learned from this journey could fill a book, but let me share the 3 lessons that matter most. First, family is not defined by blood. Family is the people who show up when you need them, who love you, without conditions, who stand beside you when the world turns against you. Eleanor was more my parent than Derek ever was. Lily is more my sister than Brandon or Tyler could be. Family is a choice renewed every day through actions and not just words. Second, money does not change who you are. It only amplifies what was already there. Derek was selfish before he had money and selfish after he lost it. Eleanor was generous when she had nothing and generous when she had billions. I try to remember this every day as I make decisions about how to use the resources I have been given. Third, the most powerful refusal is not a shout. It is a quiet decision to walk away and build something better. When I refused Derek that day in the courthouse hallway, I was not punishing him. I was freeing myself. I was choosing my own future over his past. I was honoring the grandmother who taught me that my worth had nothing to do with the people who abandoned me. I am sitting in the rose garden now, in the same spot where Eleanor and I spent so many afternoons together. The flowers are blooming red and pink and white against the green leaves. A butterfly rests on a petal nearby, its wings slowly opening and closing. The sun is warm on my face. I miss her every day. But the missing no longer hurts the way it used to. Now it feels more like gratitude, like carrying a precious gift she left behind. She gave me everything. Not the money, though, that too. She gave me the belief that I mattered, that I was capable, that I could stand on my own 2 feet no matter what the world threw at me. So let me ask you something. If you had the chance to look into the eyes of someone who betrayed you and say no, would you do it? Would you have the strength to refuse them what they wanted and walk away with your dignity intact? Think about it. I would love to hear your answer in the comments. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Subscribe to the channel so you do not miss the next story I have to tell. Your support means everything to me and helps me keep sharing these experiences with the world. My grandmother used to say that a true legacy is not what you leave behind, but what you inspire others to create. I hope my story has inspired you in some way. Maybe it reminded you of your own strength. Maybe it helped you see that the people who hurt you do not define you. Maybe it just made you feel less alone. Whatever you take from this, I hope you carry it forward. I hope you build something beautiful with your one precious life. And I hope that when you face your own moments of refusal, you find the courage to stand firm. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. And until next time, take care of yourselves and each other. I will see you in the next story.